So, on today's podcast, we're talking about the atomic habits that impact cultures of relationships, teams and organizations, and some tips to think about as we try to shape even stronger cultures into the future. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. We're in Season 8. 250 episodes and rising. And so thanks to everybody who's new to the podcast out here who continues to join. Really, really great stuff. And all I would say is welcome in. Hope you'll go back, check out all the old episodes. We have so many great topics, micropods. I've had some unbelievable conversations with other thought leaders and friends from around the world. So I hope you go back, just Google my name and whatever topic you're looking for, and I'm sure you'll find something that will resonate with you. And I hope you'll dive in and enjoy all the content that's already out there. If you are one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, thanks, and so glad you're back and that this continues to add value to your life, to your work. And my commitment to everybody out there, always every podcast I do, is I want this to be a time for you to be able to step back, to think about your own life, to think about, the temperature you're trying to set in your life and your work, and to be intentional about that culture that you're trying to create with the people around you. And my hope is that the messages that we share and the questions and the things we talk about on these podcasts challenge you to kind of think about it and then breathe some good oxygen into you so that you can take the next steps wherever that is for you in your life and your work. Before we dive into today's topic, if you'll do me the quick favor, if you will rate the podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever platform you're listening to, if you will leave an authentic review in your own words, that's really important to the algorithms, your own words. Why is this important for the world? Why are these messages helpful in a very noisy, crowded world? Why might these messages be helpful? And every time you share the podcast, whether that's on social media, whether that's within your team or your organization or your family or friends, and say, hey, here's an episode that, give it a listen. It resonated with me. Let's get together. Let's talk about it. Anyway, anytime you rate it, you review it, and you share it, it helps amplify these messages further in the world. And I'm very thankful for everybody that takes the time to do that. So thank you. We're talking about habits today. Every human on the planet has good habits and bad habits. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way whatsoever. That's only just to say that all of us, nobody's perfect. No individual human, no leader, no team, no organization is perfect. We all have habits that we form over time that are, some are the things we want more of, and some are the things that maybe we wish we didn't do or we're trying to shift. And so that's only for you, the listener, to consider is what I mean by good and bad is that we all have habits that support the vision we have for ourselves and who we're hoping to be in our life and work. And we also have, picked up some what some would call bad habits or things that maybe are lingering or perhaps get in the way or make it harder for us to be the person or the people we're wanting to be in our life and our work. So they get in our way, and I hope that makes sense to you. But of course, that's up for you to determine what you think is kind of good or bad for you. Of course, we can all, sit back and judge what's good or what's bad for somebody else, and that may seem obvious, but today isn't about that. It's actually about each of us stepping back and looking at how we might operate throughout our life and our work to be better aware of the habits, just to be aware of the habits that we have. Again, without judgment, what are those habits that we form that may support us in the kind of person or leader or culture we're trying to create? And what are the ones that might hold us back or might be getting in the way or might be lingering, and therefore we might want to think about or be aware of them. The habits we form in our relationships and within our cultures begin to shape the culture that other people experience. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about the atomic habits that impact cultures of relationships, teams and organizations, and some tips to think about as we try to shape even stronger cultures into the future. But before we dive into today's episode, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. I want to share with you the great excitement for this year's Thermostat Cultures live event on Friday, November 8th, 2024. As you know, this event that I've hosted over the last 7 years has been an inspiring day of development focused on authentic leadership and culture. I've been joined by powerful voices like Howard Behar, former president of Starbucks, Shane Battier, two-time NBA champion, Jenny Britton, founder of Jenny's Ice Cream, Jessica Jackley, co-founder of Kiva, Cameron Mitchell from Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, Greg Oden, and on and on and on. This year, Thermostat Cultures Live will be a hybrid event. There will be a powerful VIP in-person experience with limited seating in Columbus, Ohio, and a virtual experience for those wanting to participate remotely. I am so excited about this year's lineup of voices joining me, such as New York Times best-selling author of Atomic Habits, James Clear, and founder of The Theory of Enchantment, Chloe Valdery. So please visit thermostatcultureslive.com or jasonvbarger.com to learn more, and I hope you'll help share the word and join these conversations that are the currency for change. Rally your team, reserve your seats, thermostatcultureslive.com. All right, we're talking about habits again today, and again, we're not judging them, what's good or bad, but we are challenging all of us to be aware of what are those habits that we all have in our personal lives, or in our work lives, or in our cultures with the people around us. What are the habits that kind of bring out the best in us and help us shape and become that culture or that type of person, or bring out the best in us and other people around us? And what are those habits or kind of mindsets or modes of operations that might get in the way or not bring out the best in us or others, or get in the way of that vision that we have for ourselves or others? So the purpose of this is not for judgment, but it is to help us to step back and kind of be aware of what are those habits that are either supporting us or holding us back. Warren Buffett, once said that the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. This is true again for both the good, the bad, the positive, negative, however you're thinking about it. But the good, the positive habits we form over time become so strong and helpful to us that they are hard to be broken and help lead us during challenging times. So those good, positive things that, again, are in alignment with what we're trying to create, those things over time can become strong and anchored in how we show up and then help us through the challenging times that we have. And sometimes maybe the what we would call the bad or the negative, or the habits that get in the way of that vision we have for ourselves or the culture that we form over time can also be so strong that they too become so difficult to break that they actually weigh us down during challenging times. They make the road more difficult for us. So, as James Clear, the author of the best-selling book Atomic Habits, globally recognized around the world, it's been a huge hit, this book, Atomic Habits. As he puts it, oftentimes for all of us, the problem isn't you. It's not that somebody's good or somebody's bad, or somebody's positive or somebody's negative. It's just that we've gotten into a habit or a process, or what he calls, the problem isn't you, it's your system. You aren't looking at it and designing a system of habits that are intended to support your best self, support your best outcomes that you hope for either personally or collectively as a team or as an organization. So I'm super excited. The book is awesome. James has become a friend of mine, and he's going to join me as my guest at my upcoming event on Friday, November 8th in Columbus, Ohio, which is a hybrid event, thermostatcultureslive.com, limited in-person seating, VIP audience in person, which is going to be awesome. And then there'll be a hybrid virtual audience. You can learn more at thermostatcultureslive.com. But James is a good guy. Again, we've become friendly with each other and gotten together for a couple times for coffee and things to just kind of think about things. I've always, anytime I've been around him, I'm just impressed. He's just a powerful thinker, but he's also somebody who this study and research around habits is something that it's not like he's just learned about them. He's implemented this kind of systematic thinking into the way he approaches his life, as a human, as a father, husband, and certainly in the work that he's doing in the world. So he's recognized around the globe for his work on the power of habits on individuals and organizations. And so something to remember from the beginning of this conversation is that habits are compounding, and they can be both positive and negative. Again, negative compounding habits can be the way, an example would be the way stress compounds and can lead to greater health issues. So when we get into unhealthy habits and patterns of stress building up and kind of compounding over time, the outcome is that it can lead to greater health issues. Or another example would be the way negative thoughts and stories we tell ourselves, the narratives. You've heard me talk about that on different episodes I've talked about in the past, but the way that those can compound over time, and they can kind of become the deeply held narrative that we make up about ourselves or other people or other situations. Or when we see an example of outrage over something, oftentimes it's because that thought, that anger, that feeling has been compounding over time, and then finally the outcome is that it blows up with violence or anger due to that compounding impact of the anger. So those are all, some examples of, again, our negative habits have that kind of compounding effect, of course, but so do the positive ones. And on the positive sides, we know that productivity compounds as we accomplish one task in alignment with a future goal, that every time that we actually produce and show up and do what we say we're going to do and get one task further down the road in alignment, that there's a compounding positive effect towards moving us towards that future goal we set. And we know that knowledge is something that just compounds over time as we build from one idea to another, that the positive things we learn and develop, they compound on top of each other. We also know that relationships compound. And as we stack healthy, trusting behaviors over time in all our interactions, those things compound and the outcomes are better. So the point I'm making is that both positive and negative, habits can exist, and both of them compound. So the question is, where is it that we're putting our focus? And do we catch ourselves when maybe we're steering in a direction that's leading to an outcome that we don't want? James talks about standardizing before optimizing. And what he means by that is when we're wanting to shift our habits or think about new behaviors, again, personally or collectively within a team or culture, we need to think first about standardizing before optimizing, which means focusing on small adjustments to your habits that will help them become standard before you optimize, and then you kind of optimize them as you go. So don't wait. The simple way to say that is don't wait until everything's perfect to act. If we wait until we get it perfect, then we won't ever shift the behavior. And so standardizing these kind of small adjustments and patterns, and then we can optimize them. We can keep making them better as we go, but don't wait until, I can't do it perfectly, which that means I typically would then never start. And so James also talks about, especially in his book, Atomic Habits, he talks about the 4 laws of habit forming. And I want to look just quickly at those and how they relate to our own leadership, but also into the culture shaping that we do with the people and the teams and organizations around us. In Atomic Habits, he talks about these 4 laws of habit forming. The first one being, if we want to shift our habits, and again, if we want to either shift away from those things that might be compounding in negative ways and we want to find a new habit, or if we've started something and we want to continue to build upon and optimize a good thing we're doing or start a new habit, shift a habit, we need to think about these 4 laws of habit forming. And the first one is this: make it obvious. If we want to shift a habit or begin a new habit, we've got to make it obvious, which that means name the habit you're hoping to change or begin. which may sound simple, but we've got to name what is that we want to change or want to begin. Make it obvious for the change you are hoping to establish. This establishes the cue for direct action. So an example of this would be if you want to cultivate more gratitude in your life, then you might say, okay, the new habit is I want to start each day with listing 5 things I'm grateful for in my journal that is going to be by my bed. That as soon as I wake up in the morning, if the goal is I want to cultivate more gratitude in my life, then the first habit I'm going to begin to shift is I want to start each day with listing 5 things I'm grateful for, and I'm going to set the journal right by my bed to make it obvious that that's what I'm going to do. The second law is we need to make it attractive, which what this means is habits need to have a drop of dopamine. We as humans, the way we learn and develop, that we get little drops of dopamine in our brain that help us. And anybody that's gotten addicted to something, it's because they get addicted to kind of that excitement and the dopamine that comes from it. And oftentimes that's with negative things in our lives. That's a hard thing to break. But we've got to create the kind of positive dopamine for ourselves to help us get immediate feedback that helps us want to keep going. So it helps to follow up the new habit you sense that you need. I sense I need more gratitude in my life. So I want to follow up the new habit with something that I want to do. So I want to stack the habit with something that brings me joy. So to make it attractive, also not just to wake up and hopefully write the 5 things I'm grateful for in my journal by my bed, but the example would be after I do that list of 5 things I'm grateful for in my journal, then I will have a cup of coffee while I'm checking the sports scores from the night before or whatever it is, the example that might bring you joy. To stack it and make it attractive that as I accomplish that new habit, I'm going to reward myself with something that I give myself some time and space to do something that I enjoy. And of course, these are just generic examples. You would find what is relevant for you. The third law is to make it easy. To make it easy. So that's the third law of habit forming, is to make it easy. Don't shoot for too far too quickly. This is the reminder that if your goal is to get in greater shape, let's say, if you had a workout or a physical goal that you had set for yourself, the first habit shouldn't, aim to say, okay, I'm going to immediately work out 5 days a week when you haven't been working out at all. So perhaps an example to make it easy to begin would say, all right, my goal ultimately is to get in better shape, but instead of making this very aggressive goal of saying I'm going to go from no workouts a week to 5 a week, is to say I'm going to start by walking around the block once a day. You want to make it easy, and then you can continue to layer on top of it. And the more you build on the success, which I'll talk about here in a second, the more likely you're going to begin to optimize that habit. And the fourth law of habit forming that he talks about is making it satisfying. Making it satisfying. So lastly, we are more likely to repeat our patterns of behavior when we see the results and feel good about accomplishing the goal. So again, example would be when we then have, successfully completed the walking around the block once a week for a period of time and feel good about the accomplishment, we're more likely to keep going and build upon it because it starts to become satisfying. So all of these laws are true for our individual pursuits, but they're also for the habits we form within our teams and our cultures. So when you think about the habits that we get into, the rhythms, the patterns that we get into in the relationships in our lives or the teams in our lives, and certainly throughout entire culture as organizations, as we begin to get intentional about the culture we're trying to shape, the temperature we want to set, then to get intentional about breathing oxygen very intentionally into, what might be those habits we need to shift? And the way we'll begin to shift them is to make it obvious, to make it attractive, to make it easy, and make it satisfying. So all of these laws are true for our individual pursuits, but also for the habits we form within teams and cultures. And I'm excited to dive into this conversation even more with James on Friday, November 8th. Again, thermostatcultureslive.com. And we're gonna talk about how these relate to the culture that we're creating and what does it look like to make it obvious and to have clarity on what you want to change. And how do we make it attractive and that you got to want it to change. And how do we make it easy without overthinking it, but establishing, okay, well, let's get some progress. What's the next action? And then making it satisfying it. Like my language would be anchoring it as something that solves something for you and others, and not change for the sake of change, but satisfying, in fact, that it anchors that culture that you're trying to create. So I'm excited to dive into that with James. More coming up at thermostatcultureslive.com. So I hope today's episode got you thinking in some great ways. I hear some questions, as always, just for you to think about in your own life. What daily habits do you have that might be positively or negatively impacting your path? And make a list. Do you even know what those habits might be that are bringing out the best in you, or those things that maybe are getting in your way? What conversations within your team or your operations could help teach new habits? And what new habit could you make obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying? Remember, the future of leadership and future of culture shaping is you, is me, is us. We have an opportunity to calibrate our own personal thermostat and think about how do we breathe oxygen into ourselves and into others to create cultures that people want to be a part of. If today's episode if you have any questions or thoughts or things to share with us, please track us down. info@jasonvbarger.com is a good email, info@jasonvbarger.com. Or if you want to talk about support for your team, your organization, the development of your people and culture, track us down through the website, jasonvbarger.com. Again, I'll just remind you, I hope you'll go back, listen to all the great episodes and interviews and chats and topics from the past. I hope you'll rate the podcast 5 stars. I hope you'll leave a positive review, and I hope you'll share episodes that resonate with you, with the people in your life and your work. So remember, the best leaders, teams, and organizations, the best cultures on the planet continue to stimulate progress by calibrating their thermostat together, and then are courageous to breathe oxygen into themselves and into the others along the way. So, step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.